Take it away, Al.
All right, folks. Appreciate y'all being here today. Had a little technical difficulties, but we'll get going. So today we're going to talk all about septic systems. I've got tons to cover with y'all. So if you have questions, like Amy said, just raise your hand and we'll get them answered as we go. So today's class, the intention isn't about making you a septic expert. It's about helping you understand how septic systems actually work. It's about recognizing different types of systems. So when you're out in the field, understanding how to read and interpret septic permits correctly, make sense of inspection reports, and it's going to help you guide your clients better and to be able to make more confident decisions. So starting off, I'm just going to explain real quick how a basic sewer system works, a community system or a sewer system. And the way it works is you have your house, and now all the wastewater comes out of the house, goes into a drain pipe underground and into a treatment facility. And then that treatment facility, by the time it's done treating the wastewater, it either goes into a deep injection well or it's dispersed into some other type of outlet. Some systems even have it like a sprinkler system where it actually waters a yard or a ground going through before you go into community. I know in Jacksonville there's one out at Sterling Farms. And out at Sterling Farms, as you pull in, you see all these sprinkler heads, and that's the treated wastewater. I'm not sure if there's other communities like that, but I know in Jacksonville there's one. The way a basic septic system works is everything is contained on the property. All the waste comes out of the house, goes into a septic tank. From that, it goes into a distribution box and then to its own drain field, and it's filtered into the ground. I'm going to break down these components so you understand each one and how each one works. So, again, what a septic system is, it's an on-site wastewater treatment system. It's used when a home is not connected to a public sewer system. It handles wastewater from bathrooms, kitchens, laundry, pretty much anything that you have draining from your house goes into a septic system. Most systems are basically gravity fed, meaning there's really no moving parts. It's just all the way the water flows. When working properly, there is no odor, and everything is out of sight, out of mind. You really don't see anything, you don't hear anything, you don't smell anything. That's when a system is working properly. So again, how it works, all the waste comes from the house. It goes into what's called a septic tank, which is a big concrete tank in the ground. From there, all the liquid comes out into what's called a distribution box. And then all this does is it distributes the liquid into these drain fields, and then all the liquid that will then drain into the ground and dissipate into the ground. Drain fields are also sometimes called leach fields. Distribution box is sometimes called a D box. So there's different types of gravel trenches, and we'll talk about those as we break down the components. So again, first component of the system is really the septic tank. This is a picture of it and what it looks like. It's just a big concrete tank. It has two lids. And that's where everything that waste comes out of the house goes into that tank. Inside that tank, what happens is the waste comes in and there's a concrete wall in the center of that tank that separates it really into two compartments. Everything that comes in on this side is settled into either solids, which is all the sludge that sinks to the bottom, or you have your scum, which is your oil and grease that floats to the top. All the liquid, or what's called effluent, that just settles in the middle, and then it goes across to the other side. And at this side, it's then filtered out into a drain pipe, and it goes out, and then it goes out to the distribution box. So what this system does is it breaks down waste. There's natural bacteria inside the tank that this starts digesting all of the solids or all the sludge, and it reduces it down to volume so it doesn't really eliminate or cause a lot of problems. It then sends liquids over to the other side, and then the liquids go through somewhat clear, really not. Then it flows out to the drain fields. Older systems may not have a filter here. Newer systems have filters here. The other components, you have these lids up top. These are called access risers. When someone, when you hire a septic company to come out and pump the system, this is how they access the system. They'll dig these up. They're not always above ground. A lot of times they're below ground. The company will dig these up and then they will actually take like a big vacuum and they just suck all this out of there and they drain everything out of the system. That's how you have it when you have a septic system pumped. That's actually what they do, is they just pretty much suck all this out. There's different styles and different types of tanks. That's a basic understanding of how an actual tank works. From the tank, everything that comes out of the tank goes into what's called a distribution box. And this does exactly what the name of it says. It distributes all the wastewater evenly through all of these different lines. So when it comes into this box, you can see it goes into these pipes, and that's where the liquid goes, and then is drained into the trenches. There's several different versions and styles. Typically, you'll see just a square box like this, where you won't even see it because it's below ground, and it has a concrete lid that goes over top of it. Whenever you have a septic inspection done, this is one of the components that they look at. Now, inside this distribution box, this is where, again, all the liquid or effluent comes out of the tank into the distribution box, and then it goes into these pipes, and these pipes are where it goes and drains into the ground. So at the beginning of these pipes are what's called a dial of flow. You may have heard that referred to on a septic inspection. And what this does is it allows a septic inspector or an operator to be able to adjust how much liquid goes in each line. This can be twisted, and you can see this one's at the top and this one's lower. Sometimes these lines, some of them will get older and they won't really flow as well. Or maybe it's the actual distribution box is settled some, and these can be adjusted in order to allow more liquid or less liquid to go in each line. This way it's evenly distributed. If you have one line that's just taking a lot more, they may adjust it to where it takes less and feeds more into another line. Does that make sense? I hope so. So after it comes out of the distribution box and it goes into the drain lines or leach fields, these are what those look like. There's a couple different styles. The older styles of drain lines have basically pipes come out of the distribution box and they're perforated. And then there's gravel base to allow all the liquid to drain into the ground. Some of the new engineered style drain lines are a perforated pipe through the middle, and it's basically styrofoam wrapped around the outside with a mesh to hold all that styrofoam together. And you can see they just have rolls of styrofoam mesh beside each side, and that allows any type of liquid to disperse without having to use gravel. It's a lot more efficient as far as transportation-wise, installation-wise, and cost-wise. So when you hear about people talking, don't drive over a septic system, if you can see, these aren't very deep, right? And it really depends on the permit. We'll talk about that in a second, but it really depends on the permit on how deep these lines are. So if this is covered with dirt and you drive something over it and you crush that line, well, now you have a problem, right? Now it's going to stop any type of liquid from being able to drain through here to actually work efficiently to allow all the liquid to drain out of the system. I hope that makes sense. But that's basically how your leach fields or your drain lines work. So next I want to talk a little bit about a septic permit and what the components of a permit. So all septic permits, all septic systems have a septic permit. Now, unless it's really, really old. Some old systems do not have a septic permit. These permits can be found at the county office, usually at the environmental health office. Some counties are so small that they have it kind of in the permit office. Um, when it comes to septic permits in older homes, if there is not a septic permit on file, um, some counties don't really want you to file to try to create a permit. They only want you to file if there's a problem and you'll file a repair. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I know a lot of people they say, well, we can't find a septic system or a septic permit. If you can't find a septic permit, call the environmental health department. If they don't have one, then just note no permit found. Does not mean that the system is not allowed to be there. It just means it's so old that the county doesn't have a copy of the permit. Now, the city and community systems, they don't have what's called a septic permit. They typically have what's called you do an application and they do what's called tap fees. What a tap fee is where they tap into the sewer system. Um, and they base that off of usage capacity, which they refer to that as how many bedrooms. So when it comes to septic permits, they're looking at bedrooms. They don't care about bathrooms. Bathrooms aren't a factor. You can have five bathrooms, but it's still a three-bedroom house because the bedrooms is what determines the occupancy of that dwelling. That's why septic permit states the number of bedrooms, and it really doesn't really concern about bathrooms. Again, the septic permit dictates how many bedrooms you market the home as. So if you go into a home and there's like five rooms, and all rooms meet requirements for a bedroom, but the septic permit only says three, then you have to market it as a three-bedroom. Don't trust what's in the MLS. Look at the septic permit. There's a lot of times people will market them like that, but they haven't pulled a permit. So please, please, please check the septic permit. If there's not one in the MLS, pull it yourself. This is basically what a septic permit looks like. And you can see here's the house, right? Remember the waste comes out, it goes into the septic tank. From there, it goes into the distribution box. And then you can see these are the drain lines. Now, septic systems, when a permit is issued, they issue it to also have what's called a repair area. What this repair area allows is it's been tested to indicate that if one of these drain lines fail, they can add one over here and the system will still function. So if this line over here decided that, I don't know, it's not working or somebody drove a car over it or something like that, you can't normally just dig those up. Sometimes you can, but normally they're going to have you add another line if it's crushed really bad. So you would come off and you would simply come over here and put another drain line in this repair area. And this one would be abandoned. They would just disconnect it in the distribution box and add another line coming off. So the repair area is designed to where the system can be there for a long time. Look, there's systems that have lasted 30, 40, 50 years. And if it's maintained, it can last that long. But as time goes, if this area and the soils become unsuitable, there has to be an area to where they can add more drain lines or repair so that the house can stay obviously as livable. This is another sample of a permit. This is one from 2011. I know it's a little old, but it's pretty simple. It's the basics of what we still see today. It kind of lists that this is a four-bedroom home, and it's usually just a two-page. Your basic permits are usually only a couple of pages, and then here you see proposed four-bedroom. It comes out and has the septic tank, the distribution box, and then your drain lines. And the cool thing about the drain lines is you can see it tells you how long they're supposed to be. It says 67 feet, 9 foot on center, which means the centers of each line is 9 foot apart, and that's the repair area. So if you have a septic system and for some reason, you know, it's a three-bedroom and there's only a 50 foot of line, something's not right. You need to have, you can, and that you don't need to be able to dictate, hey, you should have this many feet of line, but at least you'd be able to recognize that it's a three-bedroom system and there's only one line that's 50 foot on a septic inspection. There may be an issue. There may be a line missed or something like that. This is another sample of a permit. It's a little bit older, 1999. Again, it lists three bedroom here. You can see the three bedroom here. Um, Repair area comes out, tank, distribution box, drain lines. Just an older permit style. This is a really, really old one. This is from 1974. And you can see this is the house. That's the tank. That's the distribution box. And look at how these drain lines go. There is no repair area designated on this permit, though. The older systems, they didn't have a repair area designated. So when it came time to do repairs, that's where the problem came in because there really wasn't a soil, the soil really wasn't suitable in order to put another drain line in. Amy, I'm not watching the question box or the chat, so for something there, please interrupt me.
You can, if you want to, let's answer this while we're there. How do they determine the number of bedrooms allowed?
They determine that by how many drain lines are going to be able to be put in by the soils. So if there's only allowed to be, if that area is only suitable for, let's say, 150 or 200 feet of drain line, that means you can only put a three bedroom in. If you can put more drain lines in, then you can increase the bedroom capacity. You increase the drain lines, you also have to increase the tank size. So it's not just one part of it. You have to change other components of it as well.
And next question, why can't you just replace a damaged line?
Sometimes you can. It really just depends. If that line is, been crushed, sometimes they'll let you dig it up and repair it. Other times they're not, and you have to add another line. It really just depends how bad that area is damaged.
One more question and then we'll keep going. What happens when the homeowner has already used the repair area and now needs a new drain field?
That's when they would have to apply for another permit. They would have to see if there's any other part of the property can allow for a septic system, meaning the soils are suitable enough. They can also hire a soil scientist, and I'm going to cover that a little bit later when we talk about how to get a permit.
And I can add to that. There are times, just like Al said, you apply for a new permit, they may come out and evaluate and determine that you need a different kind of system where you may have
Yep.
had a conventional system at one point. Now you might need a pump system and a raised bed. So he'll talk about that as he moves forward. Go ahead,
Yep.
Al.
Thank you. Speaking of which, there are different types of septic systems. This is a illustration of what's called a mound system. So the way a mound system works, right? We have the septic tank, the wastewater coming from the house to the septic tank, and then it goes into what's called a pump tank, which is basically a smaller concrete tank that allows all the liquid to be pumped off-site or to somewhere else or to a higher elevation. Remember, everything on this is gravity fed. So once anything has to go uphill, there needs to be some sort of mechanics involved to allow that to pump it somewhere. So in this illustration, again, we have the liquid coming into the tank. It goes into the pump tank, and then the pump will pump that effluent or liquid uphill into the drain lines to allow it to drain in. There's other components to this system. There's a control panel, and we're going to talk about all those components here in just a second. If you're ever out looking at properties and you see this, a mound like this in the yard, that septic, there is a mound system, right? That property has a mound septic system. So if you ever showing a home and you see this mound in the yard somewhere, it should raise a flag that, hey, this house has a mound system. Now, it doesn't mean that there's any issues with it. What it means is that the soil was not suitable enough from the ground level down to absorb all of the liquid coming out of that system. So what they had to do was design a system to where the leach lines or the drain lines are higher to allow enough of it to enough of the liquid to be able to be distributed or absorbed before it got to the unsuitable soils below. Usually it's like clay and that kind of thing in those areas. Um, this is another sample of a mound system in a backyard. You can see it. They've got looks like a I don't know if it's a badminton thing on top of it, but um, you can see there's a mound in the back. Here's a regular grade, and then there's a mound back here. So when you see that, you're going to look for the control box. We're going to talk about the components of this here in just a second. But obviously, when you see that, then we have a mound system, and you need to be verifying that information. So with septic systems with pump stations or lift pumps, right? These are used to move wastewater uphill or long distances, and they're needed when gravity won't work. They're usually common in places like mound systems, off-site septic systems, which we're going to talk about, or systems where the tank or drain field is higher than the house. Again, system runs off gravity. Um, Main components of these systems are the pump tank, which is a catch basin, the lift pump, and then the control panel with the alarm. So if you're walking around the house and you see this on the outside of the house or behind a bush or on a board, this is the control box. That means that there is a pump station that set the all the wastewater coming out of that house is being pumped somewhere. It could be going to a offsite system. It could be going to a mound system. It could even be going to a community system, and we'll talk about all that. Now, when there's a failure in this system, meaning the pump stops or there's a blockage or something like that, something's not working, there is a strobe light on top of this thing that'll start to go off and it makes off a really, really loud sound. It's like a loud siren. And it'll still go off until either you have somebody come out to make the repair or you hit this silence button. There's some of them have a little button where you can shut the alarm off, but the sound off, but the strobe will still go off. The light will still be blinking and flashing. Again, if that ever happens, you call someone to come out and make the repairs, and they'll come out and look at it and fix whatever's wrong. A lot of times it's the pump has failed, there's sludge or something causing the pump to fail. Things like that is usually what the issue is. This is a breakdown of what a pump tank looks like. You have the wastewater. Now, these can be put either before a septic tank or after a septic tank. It really just depends on how the system's laid out. But you have all the wastewater that comes from the house and it goes into this tank. And then there's this pump, right? And as the liquid rises, these floats then are triggered to kick the pump on. And then it pushes out the liquid to the drain lines, to the tank, whatever the next step is. And then you can see the control box is above ground. These also have an access panel to them or an access door above to where you can get in and make repairs. And when a septic tank is pumped out or cleaned out, they also clean this out and pump this system out as well. That's how they access it, is from that lid. If you see this on a permit, then the system has a pump. There is some sort of a pump system on it. Again, it has the alarm control panel box. It can be hidden behind bushes or something like that. Um, Again, if you see this in some sort of a septic permit, then you need to go back out and look and try to find it because there's definitely a pump system somewhere. There's a pump and there's a control box. Community systems also used lift tanks or pumps. They're similar to the standard pump stations. So the wastewater comes out of the house, it goes into the holding tank. There's a big green tank cover. And then what it does is then it just pumps it into the community system, county system, sewer system. Some systems use these because it's uphill. Others use these to help to flow through the system. Some examples of these in Sterling Farms in Onslow County, also the Preserve at Tidewater and Sneads Ferry, they have these. And you can tell because you're walking around the house and you'll see this. This big green circle usually indicates there is a pump station there that's pumping it into um, that community system. I hope that makes sense. Amy, we doing good on questions?
We are. I know you're going to answer a few of these.
Okay.
Uh, one of the questions was, Tanya said in the north we call it a sand mound, same thing. Probably so, Tanya.
Yes.
The purpose of sending it higher is because the soil will not handle it, Karen, and they have to move it off site in order to process it. And Susan, he's going to cover that, I know, here in a minute when we get to cost.
Yep. So there are some systems I know you've heard of that are called off-site septic systems. So what an off-site septic system is, it's when the property itself can't, it doesn't have suitable soils. So some of the septic system components are located on a different lot than the actual house, meaning the wastewater comes out of the house and then it's pumped from there to a different lot. Well, I'm going to show you an example of that in just a second. Some key facts for those is a homeowner owns both lots. So, it's on the offer to purchase and listing agreement. Is there an offsite septic? Check yes, and that's because there's a separate lot. Both lots must be maintained. A lot of folks, they don't even know they have a separate lot. They just know they have some sort of a sewer system and they never mow it. And then it gets trees and roots, and that's when you start getting lots of problems because it's lack of maintenance. There is also a recorded easement that allows the sewer line to run between the properties. So this is an example of this house, numbers lot 17. There is no septic permit for it, right? You don't see the septic system like you do here on 19. 19 has the drain lines and all the septic components on the lot. But 17, when they evaluated this community and the soils, the soil was not suitable for a septic, but the soil over here was suitable. So what they did is they designed it for the sewer, all the liquid to be pumped from this house down this easement over to this lot. And here you have the tank, the distribution box, and the drain lines. Now, sometimes the tank will be located on the property and they just pump the liquid. Other times they pump everything all the way down and the tank and everything is there. It really depends on how the system was designed. When you see things like 15A, right? That means it's attached to lot 15. It is the septic drain fields for lot 15. There's 16A, which means it's the septic system for lot 16, and 18A and so forth. So you can see this community, there are some homes that have the septic system but in their backyard on the property itself, but then there are other lots that do not. These are things to look for. Um, this is an interesting one. It's in a community in Jacksonville, and I'm sure there's others. There are what's called offsite community septic systems. So you can see this is lot 124, and this is it on the plat map. And it pumps all the waste from this house down this easement and into this large septic tank system or leach field system that's designed for all these lots. So there are several homes on this system, and it's part of the HOA or an agreement that all these homes are paying to maintain that system. This is in Fieldstone over off Hawes, over in southwest area. So if you ever come across a community septic system, I would make sure that there is an agreement in place, it's in the HOA, or something is in writing that all these homeowners are maintaining that system. Because the last thing you want is for something to fail there, because then everybody here, none of their septics are going to work. And, obviously they're all concerned about their house. Um, I would just make sure there's something in writing to show that everybody's going to share that cost. Some systems require what's called an operator. What an operator does, well, I'm sorry, these are typically used on smaller lots or poor soil conditions. So earlier we talked about maybe a septic system has been modified or there's been repairs done, and now there can't be any other repairs done to that. What do we do? Well, they would create another system that would require an operator, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Again, these systems are a lot more complex. They have pumps, they have valves, they have controls, and they must be regularly inspected to function properly. How regularly really depends on the system. Um, and some inspections can be monthly, some are quarterly, and some are annually. They're usually an annual service contracts, regardless whether it's monthly, quarterly, or annually. Whoever the operator is, which is a licensed operator, they have a contract signed with the owner to come out on whatever frequency needs to be. These costs can be $150 a year to $3,000 a year, depending on how many times they have to come out and inspect the system and how complex the system is. When you are out looking at properties and you see this is a mound system, right? And it's not always mound systems that need operators. A lot of the times it is, but not always. And you see all these tubes coming out of the ground. Those are inspection tubes, and they look like this. It's typically what you'll see. And that's how they look to see, determine if this system is operating correctly. So if you're out and you see this, again, it's not for you to look inside any of this or to do any inspections for this. It's just to say, look, there's probably an operator for this system, and we'll need to figure out what that costs, how frequently it needs to be inspected, and that kind of thing. If you're looking at a septic permit and you see something on it that says manifold detail, observation port, and you see these, there's probably needs an operator, right? If you notice this, you need to ask questions. This is just a good indication. There are a lot of people that buy a home, the system's required to have an operator, and they didn't know it until they go to sell, and then they realize it. And all that means is we got to get an operator. They come back out, they do an inspection, and get it back up to compliance with the county. Um, any questions on operators before I get into the next section on complex systems? Amy, we doing good?
We're doing good so far. Nothing on operators yet. Let me make sure I've covered that. Let me make sure I'm not missing any questions. Terry, you asked if the soil is suitable. Why can't you just replace the entire system? Sometimes you can. It truly is going to be up to the county. If you've got to do that kind of a repair, you've got to go back to the health department and see if they're going to allow the same system. I think he's probably covered that a little bit.
I'm going to cover that a
Um,
little bit more in a minute.
yep. It's a pump station for public, similar to a grinder pump we see in St.
Yes.
James. Yes. We have those in Old Georgetown. Yes. Isn't a community system taken care of by the HOA?
The
So
community sewer sometimes can be. Usually it's a separate entity, though. It's usually not the HOA. Not that it can't be, but typically that's a whole different entity. It's not controlled by the HOA.
that's
We
it. Go
good?
ahead. We're good.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about, if the system can't be repaired, this is an example of a home. If you look on the left, is existing dwelling. And this had a conventional system in it. It was repaired to the point where they had to design a new system. Onslow County decided that this home had to be condemned because the soils were not suitable for a septic system. So they ended up having to go to the DEQ, which is Department of Environmental Quality. They're located in Raleigh to design a complex septic system that actually treats the water right there on site, and then it goes and it drains into the stream behind the house. So again, it comes out of the dwelling, it goes into a tank. There is a recirculating tank with a filter, and after it's filtered, this is the tank, this is the recirculating tank, the filter. Once it's gone through that process, then it goes and it just simply drains, and all the liquid that is treated then goes into a stream that's behind the home. That system was somewhere around $50,000 to install. And I don't know what it costs to have it engineered for that. So when you're asking, can another system be designed? Yes. But a lot of times it's not the local environmental health. It has to go to a higher authority, which would be the Department of Environmental Quality in Raleigh. So let's talk a little bit about septic permits and how you get them. The basics, the basic process to get a septic permit is you just simply apply through the environmental health at the county. They're going to ask you for an application. And they're going to also have you provide a sketch. On that will be the home, a well, water lines, property lines, where you want the system, things like that. Then the county will come out because you're going to have on it where you want the system to be, and they do what's called a perk test. Now, a perk test is really simple. They take a small little uh, steel round, it's about the size of a soda bottle and or a pop bottle, and they just run it in the ground, twist it, pull out some soil. They look at it, and they just keep going as deep as they need to see how the soils are at different elevations or different depths below the ground. That'll tell them how deep the system needs to be, if it needs to be a mound, and they'll just test different areas throughout where the septic system is designed to be. But they're only going to test the areas that you requested. They're not going to do the whole property. The other option is to get a soil scientist to come out and to evaluate the whole property. Now, they're hired to evaluate the best location on the property for a system. They can also design and issue a septic permit, but they have to be approved by the county as a operator or a scientist that can issue the permits. And they can also certify the installation once it's done instead of having the county come out and do the inspections. Now, when you get a septic permit, they're typically good for 5 years. That's an Onslow. Every county is different. And understand that if you have somebody that buys raw land and they get a septic permit and there's a permit on file for that, when you go to build on that land and you start grading and removing the soil, that can seriously affect how that permit changes. You know, if they dig and they pull all the trees and everything off that property and they take it down 6 inches, they may now have to put a mound system in where they didn't have to put one in before. So just understand, if somebody is buying land and they plan on clearing it and there is a septic permit that's been on file for 3 years and they want to use it, they need to make sure that they're not going to disturb a lot of that soil or really have someone look at it to make sure that they're going to be able to do what they want to do. This is a sample of a septic permit. They'll just fill out this application. They'll usually do some sort of interview form. I'm not going to go through all these questions or the details. I just want you to see what it looks like. And this is just a sample of basically a rough sketch. The property lines, the house, here's the water line. This is where we want to do the septic tank. That's where we want to do the D-box. This is where we want to have the drain lines, and this is where we want to have a repair area. You'll simply get flags. You can buy them at Home Depot. You won't do it. The homeowner does it, and they'll mark all this off so that when the environmental health goes out to look at it, they'll know where to look. Now, if you hire a soil scientist, they'll provide a report that looks something like this. This is the lot for the property. This is the property that they evaluated. And these green areas are every place that a septic system can be put on the property. The red area means a system can be put there, but it's probably going to need to have a mound system. The soils aren't as suitable. The rest of it does not perk. It is not suitable in order to put a system. In other words, even if you put a mound system in, it's really not suitable to have that there. You could also get an soil scientist to design something like this. If you have this is usually what builders will do or developers. You know, they have the first phase to show where all the septic systems can go. And then they start plotting on the property where the house is going to be, where they plan to put the systems in. And then the soil scientists, obviously, they're the ones that monitor that and approve that once it's all installed. Any questions on septic permits or soil scientists? How we doing, Amy?
We're doing good. I know you're going to get to the cost here in just a minute, so we'll wait
Yep.
on that.
Okay. Everything else?
Does the lot need to be cleared at all for a soil scientist?
No, no, no. They can go out with it wooded just like it is. So maintenance. So some of the cost for maintenance is you look a septic tank again the last several years. Typically, you're going to want to do what's called pump the tank, where they go out and pump all that effluent out, all the sludge, everything, and even out of the pump station. That cost is usually around 350 or up, depending on the size of the system and who you hire. Now, it also depends if there's an offsite system and there are lift pumps. Some systems have multiple septic tanks. So if there's more than one tank, they're going to pump them all out. I've seen where there's a tank, it goes into a lift pump, that pump then pumps to another tank, then it goes into a distribution box. So there's all sorts of types of systems, which will all be noted on the permit. And then obviously your cost goes up depending on how many tanks and how big it is. You make it a septic inspection that comes back and says the lines or have roots or have what's called sediment in it. And what that is over time, older systems they don't have those filters in place coming out of the tank, or filters in front of the drain lines in the distribution box. So sediment from in the house, from a disposal, from a grinder pump, gets in those lines and it clogs those lines up. So what they do is they take like a big garden hose and they run it down all the way down to the end of that drain line, and then they pretty much pressure wash the inside of that line to clear all the sediment out, and they just pull all that back. In other words, they don't just pressure wash it. They'll run the hose all the way down, have the pressure washer run and pull it out so it pressure washes everything out of the line, and then they just, suck all that out of there. Those can cost $200 or more, and they usually charge per line. I've seen them $100 a line, but it really depends again how long the line is, and who's doing the work. Some other maintenance are lift pumps. So if you have a lift pump, you need to make sure the tank is clean during service. That pump on that system is going to fail. It's a mechanical component. It will fail at some point in time. Some things to look at: if it's an off-site system, it's going to have work harder because it has to pump it further. So the further that pump has to pump the liquid, or move that liquid, obviously the more strain is on that pump. So it's probably going to be a more expensive pump. If not, then it's going to probably fail a lot more frequently. Your basic pump could be $500, but I've seen them much, much higher than that. It really depends on the pump and the load. The operator for the system, again, we talked about that. It really depends on the routine. Is it monthly? Is it annually? What kind of contract? They usually want an annual contract, but those can range anywhere from $150 to $3,000 a year. Signs of problems with a septic system. If you are in a house and all the drains start running really, really slow, you're starting to have problems. If wastewater starts to back up into the house, you've got some big problems. Um, if the yard is wet, you haven't had a lot of rain, and the grass is wet around where the drain lines are, or anywhere outside that's affected by the septic system, you probably have an issue. That's usually called surfacing when you start seeing that come above ground. When you have the liquid above the ground, you'll start smelling it. Um, Again, a sewage smell starts to appear outside. What kind of questions y'all got? That was pretty quick, Amy. That went a lot faster than I thought.
You did. You did great. Okay, price range for septic. I know they can be all over the board. I
A
mean, you
basic
said
system,
50.
can be 10, 12,000 or
Yeah,
15. If you do a mound system, you're probably looking at 20 to 30,000. It really depends on how much dirt they have to haul in and how high it needs to be.
yeah,
Again, if they're doing rock system, it's going to be more expensive than that styrofoam system. They have another name for it. It's poly something. I don't remember what it is, but it's basically styrofoam. So it really depends on the components too.
right. Odor in the house that smells like sewer, probably something wrong, very possibly. Last owner never had it pumped. I would certainly want to have it
So
inspected.
if it's an odor in the house, in the drain in the home, you have what's called a trap, which basically, if you look at this question mark, it's basically an upside down question mark. The water comes out, it goes into that trap, and then it goes into your drain system. If there isn't a trap there, it'll allow odor to come back inside the house. So that's usually the problem. My daughter bought a house in Charlotte, and we found that she had a sewer smell in the house. And one of the drains, it was a rehab. She bought a flip, and the drain coming from the tub did not have a trap in it, which allowed all the sewer smell to come out of that drain from the tub.
Um, that particular system was installed in 1995. Kathy, I agree with what he just said. I probably would just have it inspected. In order to sell a home with the septic, is it required to be pumped out? No, it is not.
No.
If it's never been pumped and you've never had issues, that's going to be up to the homeowner. Does a step system also need to be pumped every so many years? And if yes, is this the same cost as a regular pump out?
So if you have a house with a septic system and it doesn't matter if it's a step system or it's just a gravity fed system, it's really going to depend on how many people are living in the house, on how frequent you need to have it pumped. I know I said 3 to 5 years. If you have a 3 bedroom home and there are 4 or 5 people living in it, you're probably going to want to have it pumped every 3 years. If you have, 2 people living in it, 2 or 3, you probably can go 5 years. It really depends on the usage. So the more people living in it and the more it's used, the more frequent you're going to want to have it pumped.
Can you have an on-site septic with an off-site well?
Yes.
Mhm.
You can have an on-site septic. So if you're talking a water well, there are complete different systems. There can be a water well off-site that accesses a water for the house. But you can have a septic tank on the property. Usually the pump station is going to be right there on the property to pump it somewhere else. So I'm not sure what you mean by the well.
Is there regular maintenance needed on a pump grinder system?
Same maintenance is going to be to have it pumped. When you have it pumped, they'll kind of come out and pump that system out. The regular maintenance would only be if it requires an operator. You're not going to really do a whole lot of maintenance to that pump besides, having it cleaned out whenever they pump out the system.
I remember, does a septic inspector want the pump system pumped before the ins
Say that again. I lost her. She must have got. Let me look and see if I can figure out what she was asking.
Yeah, we lost Amy. She
Yeah.
froze
I
and then we
can,
lost her.
so I can ask the question because it was my question.
Okay.
I just can't remember if when you're scheduling a septic inspection, if the inspector wants the septic tank to be pumped before the inspection or they do not want it pumped before the inspection.
You don't want it pumped before the inspection. The reason being is they want to see how the system's operating now. Um, so if you pump it out, they're going to say that we can't really tell how the system's operating because there's no liquid or anything to tell if it's backing up or if it's flowing like it should. Amy, I'm not
Yep,
sure
I'm
we.
back. I lost you
Yep.
guys. I lost the internet there for a minute. Um, on an inspection, is a certificate required? Are you meaning like the information regarding the inspection, Christina? Like what they discovered?
Okay, so I come from Colorado where we have a lot of septic tanks and there you have to have it pumped 1 year prior to, and in order to do a transfer, you have to have a certificate from the health department.
No, we don't have to have that.
So you
That's
have, we don't need anything?
no. It's going
No.
to be that's local driven, really. That's not, I haven't seen that anywhere on the coast.
Mm-mm.
Oh, that makes it easy.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
mean, it's good when I talk to a homeowner with a septic system and they're getting ready to list, I ask them when's the last time you had it pumped? And if they say it's been a while, then I say, look, we need to have it pumped or plan to have it pumped. I mean, it's kind of like buying a new house with someone else's shit. You don't want it. You know what I mean? Literally.
Yeah.
That's what I tell them.
Yeah. Well, that's an easy process.
Yeah.
In Pennsylvania, the water well was required to be 100 feet or more away from the septic. You do have to have a number of feet. I do think it is 100 feet, isn't it? Or is it 50 feet, Al,
I don't remember. I think that's driven. I don't
in the
remember how far
county?
it is, but there
Yeah,
is a distance for that as well.
yeah.
Yes.
My seller is the original owner and has been in the home for 22 years, never had it pumped, insisted he did not need to. So we had it pumped and needed a new distribution box. $2,000 with pump company advises to use copper sulfate to treat for root intrusion. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Look, if you have a house that has a septic system and there's a lot of trees, there are a lot of treatments that they can just simply flush down the toilet that'll help treat the roots. In other words, it's going to kill the roots that are inside that septic system. Then, if you have a offsite system that's not being maintained, definitely need to look into that.
Can a house that has a septic have a garbage disposal? They can. It is absolute. I mean, it's generally not something that a plumber or most people would encourage. A builder would say, don't do it.
I've seen it. I've even seen it in new construction. That again, um, what happens when you have a septic system is you want to use things that are biodegradable. Different types of toilet paper are not. They won't. The enzymes that are inside the septic system won't degrade and eat away at that stuff. So it causes obviously it to either stop the system up or then it just floats around the top. So it's not biodegradable. It doesn't dissolve in the system. And that's the same when it comes to a garbage disposal. The things that you're grinding up that goes into that tank, it can clog up the filters if it's not able to be eaten up by the bacteria that's in that system. It can have it, but it's not suggested to have it. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Is there a way to tell when flushing the toilet that there may be a root issue?
I don't know about a root issue, no. I mean, if there's an issue with the system when you flush the toilet, and I wouldn't say just one toilet. If you flush all the toilets and they seem to move really, really slow, then you probably have a problem. And it
Yeah.
may not be roots. I mean, it could be, but it could be something else. You need to have it looked at. But, just because one system, one toilet or sink is flowing slow in the house, doesn't mean it's a septic issue. If they're all moving slow, then you probably have an issue. Yep.
Any more questions, guys? Anybody?
Cool.
That's fantastic. We did it in under an hour. Thank you, Al. I am grateful that you went through all of that with our folks today. This is recorded. I'll save a copy. And if you have any more questions, let us know. Thank you all so much for being with us today. Thank you, Al.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Cal.
Thank you.